Continue. All right, hello everybody, and welcome to this today's episode of Tech Tuesday, our ongoing webinar series here at Coretek Services. My name is Kevin Marheine, and I am our digital marketing specialist. I am the host of the series, and I am joined today by David Frey. David is one of our architects here, and he is going to walk through a presentation today that we've prepared about Microsoft Teams live events. Of course, the platform that we're using here today to actually host the webinar. So if you've joined for one of our previous episodes, traditionally we've used GoToWebinar as our webinar platform, but here today, excited to show you some of the capabilities that go along with the live event feature inside of Microsoft Teams. But before we get to the presentation, just a couple of very quick housekeeping items. We are recording today's presentation, so we will be sending out a recording for you to view at your convenience. So if you weren't able to join the day of, you'll be able to check that out on demand, and we'll also be sending out the slide deck as well for your reference. If you have any questions, we do have the Q&A feature enabled. So at any time, you can go ahead and use that Q&A to enter in your questions, and we are saving time at the end of the presentation to go over those. So we will get to those towards the end here. And without any further delay, I will go ahead and we'll take a look here at the agenda. David is going to walk us through a Teams Live Events overview. He'll talk about the settings and policies, some of the roles that are part of the system. He'll actually walk you through the process for scheduling a live event, and then he'll provide some further information about live events here in Teams, and then we'll do the Q&A as I mentioned at the end. So David, thank you for taking the time for preparing this presentation for us today, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to you and let you walk us through what we have.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So let's dive right in. Teams Live Events is a service that Microsoft developed as a platform to provide customers with an opportunity to broadcast video and meeting content to large audiences. And it supports full integration with content production and several other features that you can see there and so forth. We didn't do any video production or so forth to include here today, but the capabilities are vast, and you'll see some of the larger presentations from companies like Microsoft, where they've got multiple presenters and pre-recorded video and so forth, all integrated. That's all fully supported with Teams Live Events. Now, within Microsoft Teams, when you schedule a meeting, there is a limit of 300 participants for a Teams meeting that is interactive, fully interactive, where anyone can come off of mute and speak and so forth. Multiple individuals can share screens and whatnot. Live events supports up to 20,000 attendees by default, but Microsoft last year, in about March, April timeframe, they increased the limit during the COVID-19 pandemic to 100,000 with the caveat that you'll see on the next slide. We'll also talk here in a few minutes about the roles as far as who can present and so forth. So that increase to 100,000 is extended through June 30th of this year. Any event that you need to schedule beyond 20,000 invitees or attendees would need to be coordinated through the Microsoft 365 Assistance Program. Just like many other things within the Microsoft 365 tenant, there are policies and settings and so forth specific to live events. The settings are what you see on this particular slide, where you can put a custom support URL to where attendees click on it and it would take them to, say, your company portal or something to that effect. And then if you're using a third-party distribution provider to distribute content, you're going to see that built-in Microsoft supports those three vendors' solutions for content distribution. And then with policies, we see here there are two policies here. By default, you have the global org-wide policy, and we also have created a custom policy called public live event. And The global policy, the default here, you can see is set to where the audience, that third line down there, is limited to folks within the organization. And the default recording is set to always record. Now, in our custom policy, we've allowed folks that are associated with this particular policy to extend that audience to everyone, and then have the option to change the recording to either always record, never record, or only the organizer of the event can record. Which brings us to the roles. There are several roles related to live events. First is organizer. In this case, Kevin is the organizer. The organizer schedules the event, coordinates with the attendees, sends the link out that you'll see here in a moment, how that link gets created, and that gets sent out, and that's the link that you folks that are attending this event received and clicked on to join it, and so forth. And you can see some of the different options that the organizer has. Also, there are controls to show or determine what content is shown on the screen, whether there's a video and a side window and so forth. Then there's a producer. This is a supporting role that if you're doing some of those things like I mentioned a minute ago about video content and so forth, the producer you can have a producer that sits alongside that handles all of that coordination during the presentation. A presenter, which is the role I'm in today, where you can see I'm sharing a presentation on the screen. If there was video content and so forth, or webcam, that you see also. And then the attendees. Attendees are view only. And if the Q&A feature is enabled for the event, as it is here, you have the capability to enter questions in a chat window type of a scenario. Who can create live events? So as you see detailed here, one would need a particular license, and that license tier would be in the Office 365 Enterprise E1, E3, or E5, or Microsoft 365 tier, as well as the education tier A3 or A5. And that does not affect attendees. The attendees can attend as a guest or authenticated, but do not require a license to attend a live event. There are permissions to whether or not one can create an event and so forth, like the custom policy I showed you. That is assigned to a group that was created that only a few people are a member of. If you're not a member of that group, then the global policy applies, and you would be limited to creating an event within the organization only as far as your audience. Microsoft does integrate Stream and several other of the Microsoft Cloud Services features into live events that we're not going to go into in great depth here today. But as you start dipping your toe in the water with live events, you'll see that the feature set is very, very wide, and the capabilities are pretty impressive. As far as attending, we talked about this back with the policies. If it's public, then anyone who has that link can attend it. If it's you can also restrict it to a specific group within your organization, which you will see that here in another slide here in a moment, or organization-wide. So those are really the three options related to attending an event. Now we'll walk through a few slides about how to schedule a live event. So in the Teams client, you see here a calendar view. You click on the drop down next to the new meeting in the upper right corner of the client, and you'll see an option to create a live event, which brings you to the screen. You type in a title. You decide right here if you're going to invite additional presenters. You can also add them to the meeting once it's created. By default, the person scheduling it is the organizer, and we can invite multiple people as producers or presenters here. But the actual meeting link gets created in on a subsequent step here. This slide here at the very top, you see what we were just talking about, where the live event permissions as far as who's going to be able to attend this. It can be limited to individual people, or groups. It can be organizational wide, or it could be public. And then you see where we highlighted the Q&A button or checkbox is not checked by default. So if you wish to enable the Q&A feature, you need to check that box. You can also edit that setting after you create the live event.
Yeah, David, and to jump in here, I know this is really going to be a spot where, depending on your particular use case for setting up the live event, this is really where you're going to want to spend just a little bit of time, because as David mentioned, with those three options, you really do have the ability to say you're doing, your sales QBR meeting and you want to host that through live events. You want to restrict that to certain teams and certain groups within your organization. You have the ability to do that. You have, if you're doing a company-wide kickoff and you want to include the whole org, that's something you have the ability to do. Or if you're doing something like we're doing here, where we're hosting a webinar through it, obviously making it public so that anyone who registers can access it without having to be first added to your organization is really going to be the way to go. So again, depending on what you're really looking to do here, I think these three options, if you have these three, you can really carve it up pretty effectively to make sure that you are supporting the audience that you're really looking to engage with during your live event.
Great, thanks, Kevin. And also of note here is the fact that the check boxes regarding recording are both checked by default. So if you're scheduling a live event and this particular box is checked for recording available to attendees, anyone who attends the event will have that link available to them. If you wish to control that, you would uncheck that box and then provide that recording later. Perhaps there's going to be some editing or additional content or whatnot. So that would be made available. That's how this particular event is coordinated. Kevin will send those links out after the event.
Yep, and the reason for us choosing to do that too is, we wanted to, of course, with all of our Tech Tuesday webinars, we make those recordings available on demand, but we host them through our YouTube channel. So by, making sure that we're limiting the control to the recordings to ourselves, we take the recording, we post it to YouTube, we get to follow our normal procedure, and then of course share it out with everybody. And certainly, as David mentioned, thinking back to some of the use cases, say you had some partners or things like that were joining your sales QBR that you may have allowed access to your live event. Perhaps you don't necessarily want them to be taking that recording away with them. So by limiting, who has access to the recordings there with those 2 bullet points is certainly something that you do want to watch out for. So great point, David.
So this is the link here. You want to chat a little bit about that, Kevin?
Yeah. So as we were getting things planned out here for today, one of the interesting things that I certainly noticed as we were getting everything set up was that when you first set up everything as the organizer, what it will do is it will create a link for the presenters and the producers to go ahead and join the event. And that is specifically for people who you have set as producers and presenters. If you forward that invitation to people, they will then be able to join the event as a producer or a presenter. So there is and David has it pointed out there is a link there specifically for attendees. So if you are doing a public event like we're doing here with the webinar, you really want to make sure that you build out an invitation like we did with the calendar invite, specifically with that link, because that's going to be the link you want to give to a situation like we have here where we're opening it up to the public. Because again, if you were to just forward this invite that it's creating here, this is specifically for people who are producers and or presenters. So, not necessarily the access that you want to give every attendee. So you really want to watch out and make sure that you're using that attendee link when you're passing it along to the people you would like to join your webinar or whatever your event may be.
Great. I'm going to skip ahead to the last slide. Just this is part of the deck that will be shared with you all. It's got some links to documents that are were used in part to compile this presentation, but provide much greater detail in live events, the capabilities, and how to and so forth.
Yeah, and this was a particular topic where we did see quite a bit of interest. We had quite a few people sign up. So down the road, we may actually do a follow-up webinar to this where we take a look at some of the additional capabilities that exist in live events. As David mentioned when he was going through the slides, there are a number of different tools you can use when actually producing the event to tie in some different functionality and make things, produce David, I don't want to insult us by saying a higher quality event, but a more produced event, a more what's maybe more polished event, something that has a higher production value. If you want to have transitions between scenes and maybe work in some video and all that good stuff, there's certainly tools out there. I'd equate it to if anyone is actually familiar with, streaming and things like that, there are presentation tools that let you really plug in and really enhance that user experience by helping you control the content that you're showing and things like that during an event. So if anyone has any familiarity with tools out there like OBS or Streamlabs or any of that good stuff that I know exists out there on the streaming front, essentially there's plugins like that for Teams live event that gives you the ability to really robustly build out, your presentation.
Right. It can include audio, pre-recorded audio, video. We can easily do multiple presenters and multiple content.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool things, and I know the resources that David has included inside of the deck here. I know some of those start to you can certainly find yourself going down a rabbit hole if you are interested in exploring that more with the resources he provided, because they certainly do touch on the topic as well.
Yes, and we've got a question here about having a welcome splash screen for attendees to see prior to launching the event. We'll have to look to see if that's on the roadmap for live events. Right now, unfortunately, it's just the generic screen that you were presented when you joined. But we'll definitely look into that with Microsoft and see where that is on the roadmap.
Yeah, because certainly I think if it's not only something with live event, but if you look at other tools like GoToWebinar or Zoom or things like that, I think a lot of services currently have a very cut and dry, we're waiting for the presentation to begin type screen, very sort of bland, and it doesn't give you a whole lot of customization. A lot of things are just pulled in automatically, like the title of your event and things like that. So certainly, hopeful that something Microsoft could do to really distinguish themselves from some of the other services that are out there would certainly be able to give you as the organizer the ability to customize that and control what the audience is seeing prior to the event starting. So as David mentioned, something that we'll keep our eyes out on and something we can bring up with our contacts at Microsoft to see if that is something that they currently have built into their roadmap. I know another common question that we get, David, and I believe you. I know we already answered it, but just wanted to provide some color around it because I know it's a topic of why would you, or what size how many people can a live event support as opposed to a Teams meeting. And I believe, obviously a live event can host quite a bit more than a regular meeting can. That number for regular meetings capped out is at 300, as you already mentioned earlier in the presentation, David. But prior to joining Coretek, I was with a software company, and a good example of why having the ability to have the live event in addition to just a regular team meeting is when we would do our company-wide meetings. We were fortunate enough where we had quite a few employees here, particularly in Michigan, but in the United States. But then we also had offices in the UK and Australia. So when you try to get all three geos on a call at once, we quickly exceeded the standard 300 there. So having the ability to have a live event that was able to support a larger audience was it was crucial for us. We couldn't make it work with just the regular Teams meeting. So having these live events essentially gave us the ability to come together as a company. Obviously, time zones, as you can imagine, was the biggest hurdle at that point, but it was great to have the technology in place to be able to do that.
So, Kevin, we've got another question here. Can you see attendee details yet, or just the number of attendees? They believe this was coming also. Do you see attendee details on the organizer screen?
Yep. Yeah. So just at this time, we can just see the total number of attendees. It does not tell us the specifics around who those people are. I imagine that could be potentially different depending on, again, how you have, which settings you have enabled. Because with our event being set to public at the moment, I know that's probably more difficult for Microsoft to capture that the information to identify who people are. Now, if you have it set up to be people within your org and things like that, I'm sure that functionality, if not already in place, is much closer to coming around, just because it's, you're signed into the organization. It should be easy for Microsoft to grab that data. We can certainly do some follow up on our side with our Microsoft reps to see if there is a release date in mind for being able to see more detail about the participants, though, especially when it comes to public events.
One thing to point out, and I just pasted the link to that in the chat window, is that there is an engagement report that will show you who joined and who left the meeting and some other details. So it's not live during the session yet, but you do have the availability of generating that report.
Fantastic. All right.
But doesn't look like there are any other questions at this time, Kevin.
Yep. No, it looks like that is all the questions we have at the moment. We do still have 7 minutes left, so if someone does have any last minute questions they'd like to get answered here as I go through these last little bit of wrap up here, please feel free to get that submitted. We do have some time, but as mentioned at the beginning, we will be sending out a recording of today's presentation to you along with the slide deck. Again, I highly recommend checking out some of the links to some of the resources that David has there inside of the presentation. They really do a good job of expanding upon the different areas, and really, I know, David, for us, they were even with our familiarity with the product, certainly they go into quite a bit of detail. And I know I found myself going down some rabbit holes chasing after some different info and things like that. But certainly some good resources there if you do want to do your own research. And then, of course, if you do have any questions, we're always here to answer them. You can reach out to us through the website. Schedule a meeting with us. We'd be happy to take a look at what you're currently doing and see if there's any way that Coretek might be able to help you out, whether it's on the team side of things or if there's any other projects you have currently going on. Certainly willing to jump in and take some time to really understand what you're looking for and see how we might be able to help. And yeah, certainly I can see there we did get the remark as the digital marketing specialist. I know that pain, am always asked about who's joining webinars and events and things like that, and making sure that's there. So we will. I'd have an action item here myself to go see if there is a launch date in mind around when and if they'll be able to provide more information about specifically who's joined and things like that. So we'll do some digging there and be in touch. But David, again, thank you for taking the time to present for us today. For everybody who joined today's webinar, I just want to thank you, and for everybody who registered and is going to be watching this on demand, of course, thank you as well. We will be back again next Tuesday. For this one, we'll actually be back in GoToWebinar for that one. So, but we'll be taking a look at GCC, GCC High, and Azure Gov is the topic we'll be looking at there. So if you're interested, invites for that will be going out. You can also visit our website. Underneath the events section of the website, there's a list of all our upcoming events, so you can certainly register there if you don't receive one of our emails. But until next time, I'm Kevin Marheine. Thanks again to our speaker, David Frey, and we will catch you during the next Tech Tuesday webinar. Thank you and have a fantastic afternoon.